Ready to unlock some serious English skills. We're diving deep into this awesome guide you shared with me, and trust me, this isn't going to be like your old English classes back in the day.
Yeah, this is way different. What I find fascinating about this guide is how it really focuses on laying a strong foundation first. It's like it
Yeah.
really lines up with the latest research on how people learn languages best.
Now that's what I'm talking about. And one thing that immediately caught my eye was how it mentions that like over 1.5 billion people across the globe speak English. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And I think that really drives home the value of, truly mastering English, wouldn't you say? I mean, think about it. Work, travel, even just being able to enjoy a wider range of books and movies.
Absolutely. And the best part, this guide doesn't waste any time. It dives right into 5 clear steps to help you improve. So, first up on the list, parts of speech. They're like the foundation of everything.
It's like building a house, right? You need those core building blocks, your nouns, verbs, adjectives, the whole 9 yards to create something meaningful. And the way this guide explains each part, it's fantastic. It's super clear without getting too technical or jargony.
Exactly. And that's what I love about it. Instead of just throwing a bunch of grammar rules at you, they actually take the time to explain why these parts of speech are so important.
I agree. I think that's really key. They highlight the why behind the what, and I think that's really what helps solidify the knowledge, make it stick.
And you know what else helps make it stick? The way they use these relatable examples. Like, they could have just said noun, but instead they give you dog, house, tree. It just makes it click, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. I think our brains just naturally gravitate towards those concrete images.
For sure. Okay, so moving on from individual words, the guide then dives into sentence structure. And get this, they even bring Harry Potter into the mix.
Which is so clever. Using those pop culture references can really make learning a lot more fun and engaging. I mean, think about it. If even Harry Potter needs good grammar, maybe it's not so bad after all.
Exactly. And they break down sentence structure into that classic formula that I'm sure we all remember from school. Subject, verb, object. It's like you read it in this guide, and it's like a light bulb moment.
Yeah, and that's what good explanations and good examples can do. So now that we've covered the basics of sentences, the guide then takes us into the, well, let's be honest, sometimes a little more challenging world of verb tenses.
Verb tense is the bane of every English learner's existence at some point.
Right. They can be tricky, for sure. But I think the guide does a good job of focusing on those 3 essential tenses. Present, past, and future. And they provide really clear examples for each. And you know what? For anyone who's up for a challenge, I think this could also be a good time to explore some of those more nuanced tenses, like the perfect tense.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
It's like a little extra credit for those who are really serious about leveling up their grammar game. All right, so we've covered parts of speech, sentence structure, and verb tenses. What other linguistic adventures await?
Well, before we jump into the world of vocabulary, the guide, very wisely, I think, dedicates a section to something that I think a lot of people kind of overlook, and that is punctuation.
Oh, punctuation is so important. It's like the unsung hero of clear writing.
You got that right. And what's cool is the guide actually makes it fun. They even call the period a stop sign for a sentence.
It's such a good analogy. It's like those little dots and dashes are like traffic signals for our sentences, They make sure everything flows smoothly and the meaning is crystal clear.
Exactly. Okay, so now that we've got a handle on those essential structural elements, the guide takes us to what I think is the most exciting part, building vocabulary.
Because, what's the point of having a perfectly structured sentence if you don't have the words to, actually fill it with?
Exactly. And they offer some really practical advice here. So they start by emphasizing those common words, the ones we use every single day.
It's like learn to walk before you can run, right? I remember when I was learning Spanish, I thought I had to memorize all these super complicated words right away. But then I realized I couldn't even hold a basic conversation. It was those common everyday words that really made the biggest difference.
That's such a good point. And, once you have that solid foundation of those common words, then the guide dives into synonyms and antonyms.
Oh, yeah. Now, this is where things start to get interesting. Who wants to sound like a broken record using the same words over and over again?
Exactly. Synonyms and antonyms give your language that variety, that nuance.
For sure. I'll be honest, though, I used to struggle with memorizing those long lists of synonyms and antonyms. Do you have any tips on how to actually make them stick?
Yeah, I think the key is to try to move beyond just memorizing those lists and actually try to use those words in context. Like instead of just memorizing happy and joyful, mean the same thing. Use them in sentences that are relevant to your own life. So for instance, you could say, I felt so happy when I got that good news, and then switch it up and say, I felt this surge of joyful energy, you know?
Oh, I like that. So it's all about making them your own, really using those words.
Exactly. And speaking of active learning, another thing the guide talks about that I think is so important is using context clues.
Context clues, you mean like figuring out what a word means by looking at the words around it?
Exactly. You're like a detective, right? The guide really emphasizes that you don't always need a dictionary if you pay attention to the surrounding words.
Oh, that is so true. I do that all the time without even realizing it. Like if I'm reading and I come across a word I don't know, I don't immediately pull out my phone to look it up. I try to figure it out from the rest of the sentence.
Exactly. It's so much more engaging, you know? And the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Totally. It's like building those language muscles. Now, one thing that I found super helpful in this guide was the section on prefixes and suffixes.
Ah, yes. The magic of word transformations.
I know, right? It's amazing how just by adding like a few little letters at the beginning or the end of a word, you can completely change its meaning. Like you add un to happy, and suddenly it's unhappy.
Or pre to view to get preview. It's like having this whole linguistic toolkit at your disposal.
Totally. And the guy does a fantastic job of giving you all these great examples of how these prefixes and suffixes work in different situations. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's one more thing, one more really important thing that the guide stresses when it comes to building your vocabulary, and that's reading.
Yes, and for good reason. I mean, reading, it exposes you to so many new words, and it does it in context, which is key. It's like you're immersing yourself in all these different words, and you just kind of absorb them naturally.
I love that. And it's not even just about, learning new words. It's about expanding your horizons. It's about opening yourself up to new ideas and stories and perspectives.
Absolutely. Now, while the guide focuses mainly on reading, I think it's also important to mention that, active listening is also crucial for language learning, like really listening.
Oh, for sure. Whether it's listening to podcasts, hopefully you're all listening actively right now, or engaging in conversations with friends. Paying attention to how people use language can be so beneficial.
Totally. So to bring this back to everyone listening, don't underestimate the power of really surrounding yourself with English as much as possible, whether it's through books or movies or music or even just conversations.
I completely agree. The more you engage with the language in different ways, the more natural it'll become. Totally. It's like creating that language bubble around yourself, right? Now, one thing that really resonated with me that the guide talks about is like this idea of, not being afraid to make mistakes when you're learning English.
Oh, yeah, that's huge. I can't tell you how many people I've met who, they're almost too scared to speak English because they're so worried about making a mistake.
Oh, totally. I mean, it makes sense, right? Nobody wants to say the wrong thing or feel embarrassed.
Of course not. But the thing is, everyone makes mistakes, especially when you're learning something new, like a new language. In fact, you could even say that mistakes are like an essential part of the process.
Mistakes, they're like little opportunities, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was learning French, I once accidentally told someone I was pregnant when I meant to say I was full from dinner.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Can you imagine? Talk about a mortifying mistake. But
Yeah.
You know what? I never made that mistake again. It was actually like a hilarious learning experience. And honestly, if anything, I think it gave me more confidence to just keep speaking.
That's the spirit. Mistakes can actually help us pinpoint, the areas where we need to improve. And a lot of times they lead to those aha moments that really solidify our understanding.
Exactly. So to anyone listening who's maybe feeling a little self-conscious about their English, embrace those mistakes. They're not failures. They're just proof that you're learning and growing.
Well said. So as we start to wrap up this deep dive into English language learning, what would you say is the most valuable takeaway from this guide?
Oh, that is a tough one. There are so many good nuggets of wisdom in here. But if I had to pick just one, I think it would be this. Learning English, it's not about reaching some final destination. It's about enjoying the journey. It's about celebrating those small victories along the way and never losing that curiosity for this wonderfully complex, always evolving language.
I love that. It's a lifelong adventure, really. And for everyone listening, I would leave you with this. Think back on all the tips that we've talked about today, right? Which one really resonated with you the most? And more importantly, how can you put it into practice, like today? Even if it's just a small step, like using a new word in conversation or trying out a grammar rule you learned, those small steps can make a world of difference over time.
So true. So don't wait for the perfect moment to, start improving your English. Just jump in, make some mistakes, have some fun with it, and enjoy the ride.